All right. Thanks so much for dropping those intros. And if you're still introducing yourself, please feel free to keep those coming in the chat. We'd love to see who's joining us today. But I want to officially welcome and thank you all for joining us. We are very excited to have you here today to share more about the CTE Without Borders Policy Playbook and share how this resource can help you in your states to provide expanded access to high quality CTE and work-based learning. We'll go ahead and move us forward today. All right, so while you're continuing to drop your introductions in the chat, we'll take a moment to introduce some of the facilitators for our webinar today. So if I haven't had the chance to connect with, I am so sorry, my dog is in the background. If I haven't had the chance to connect with you today, my name is Haley, and I am a Senior Policy Associate with Advanced CTE. I've been working on this project, CTE Without Borders, for over a year and a half now, and I'm very excited to share more about this resource with all of you. We'll also have some additional folks helping to facilitate our session today, so I'll go ahead and pass it off to Dale.
Good morning or afternoon, wherever you might be joining us today. I'm Dale Winkler. I serve as the Senior Vice President of the Southern Regional Education Board, and SREB was very pleased to be a part of this initiative as we brought together focus groups to talk about CTE Without Borders from the secondary perspective. So thank you for the opportunity.
And Christina.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Sedney, and I'm the Director of Policy and Strategic Initiatives at the Western Interstate Commission for Higher Education, or WICHE for short. We're kind of the Western version of SREB, and we focus particularly on post-secondary, so we helped on that side of things in putting together the roundtables for this work.
Thank you so much, Christina and Dale, for being with us today. And of course, Kate Creamer, our Executive Director, our fearless leader. She is currently handling all of the things, so she can't hop on right now, but she was my thought partner and a leader in this work, and greatly appreciate everything that she's contributed to this project, and of course, Advanced CTE in our organization. So we'll go ahead and move us along. So here is what we're going to be covering today. So I'll walk us through our objectives, then we'll go through an overview of the CTE Without Borders project and initiative. Then we'll have an overview of the CTE Without Borders policy playbook. Then we'll dive into a facilitated Q&A with our panelists. And then I'll share with you some opportunities upcoming from Advanced CTE to support expanded access in your own states. And then we'll focus on what's ahead and any closeout items. So here are our objectives. So we are going to walk away from this session with understanding the purpose of the CTE Without Borders policy playbook. We'll understand what expanded access to CTE and work-based learning within and across states looks like in practice. We'll go through an overview of the 6 overarching strategies to help expand access that we discuss in the CTE Without Borders policy playbook, and hear from a panel of experts on expanding access to high-quality CTE and work-based learning. So let's kick things off with an overview of CTE Without Borders. So taking a moment to unpack CTE Without Borders. So this initiative is identified in Without Limits, which is our shared vision for career technical education that was published in 2021. And when we were creating this shared vision, we were experiencing the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. So many of the conversations that came out of the planning sessions with our partners for the shared vision focused on how difficult the pandemic was for education, but also we highlighted the opportunities that were born out of this crisis. So in light of school shutdowns, we witnessed educational leaders adapt to continue to serve learners, even if they weren't able to enter school buildings or learning facilities. So Principle 5, each learner can access CTE Without Borders, speaks to this innovation and highlights the amazing work our educational leaders have achieved during this difficult time, and also pushes the field to consider ways to expand access outside of traditional learning environments. So within this principle, there are 4 guiding actions. So the first is removing geographic barriers. So this considers and centers equity and access for learners, but especially considers the dimension of equity pertaining to geographic access. So this is especially important for learners living in rural areas, but we know that learners frequently miss opportunities in suburban and metropolitan areas as well. a national framework to connect education and workforce. So career clusters, I'm sure you're all very familiar with that work going on, and that will be published soon. Our team continues to work hard on that so that we have a shared framework so that we can connect those two sectors. The next point is developing interstate compacts. So developing agreements for agencies within and across state lines to partner or create the conditions and infrastructure for expanded access across secondary and post-secondary institutions. And then finally, providing high quality virtual opportunities. So this can include hybrid opportunities as well, because we know that while online learning is not new, its prevalence has grown in light of the pandemic. And this principle pushes leaders to expand virtual and hybrid learning opportunities to continue to provide expanded access. So after establishing Principle 5 as a priority and garnering the funding for this project, our organization partnered with Southern Regional Education Board and the Western Interstate Commission on Higher Education, also known as SREB and WICHE. And both organizations engage in and support states in providing expanded access. So they were the perfect partners to support on this work. And as they mentioned in their introductions, SREB focuses more on the secondary side, while WICHE focuses on the post-secondary side. So leveraging the partnership, we held 6 roundtables with more than 100 participants to understand from them, what do you need to expand access within your state and also across state lines. We also held one-on-one interviews with state leaders to learn more about these promising practices and strategies that were in existence. So we took all of those conversations, all of those ideation sessions and rounds of feedback, and we leveraged all of that information to develop our 6 focus areas that we believe will support states in actualizing CTE without borders and providing expanding access to high quality CTE and work-based learning. And all of this information, including some desktop research, has been synthesized within the playbook. So within the CTE Without Borders policy playbook, we identify and discuss the following. So we first make the case. So why education, industry, and institutions should care about this work and why it's important. We also identify the players. So who are the champions that are needed to drive this work and the folks that need to move the work forward? We articulate strategies and actions, so the how to do this and what we recommend states should adopt. And then we also provide examples and resources to support you with actualizing the how. So I'll go ahead and pass it over to Dale to review our focus areas in the playbook.
Right. As Haley said, there are 6 overarching focus areas in the CTE Without Borders policy playbook, and I'm just going to do a quick overview of those 6 focus areas. First is looking at partners. These efforts will require leadership at all levels within and across states. Thus, you need to think about partners in new ways to leverage your policies and funding and programs and practices. So you'll want to make sure you have representation from your state agencies, both secondary and post-secondary leaders, partnering organizations, and your local education agencies as well. In regards to data, data should be driving all of the decisions that are made. So to fully engage the data discussion and to expand CTE, you need to look at conducting a audit or asset mapping. You need to make sure that you have access to the most up-to-date labor market information, as well as continuing to build on agreements and expand agreements across state agencies and institutions. You will also want to look at funding as the third focus area that's addressed within the playbook. And within funding, we have to make sure that we are being flexible and that we're making sure that we're going to be able to sustain the funding beyond some initial investments. But we need to consider the braiding of both local, federal, and state funding, pulling together and blending our funding, being very creative in how we utilize our different resources, and leveraging those philanthropic partnerships that we have across our states. And so that's the third focus area. Our fourth one relates to credits. We want to make sure that we're aligning our programs and our credentials so that credits follow the students as they transfer among different education organizations and institutions. You want to enter into agreements that allow for reciprocity with certifications and licensures. Our next focus area is around conditions. We want to ensure that there's equitable access to broadband. We want to increase virtual and hybrid learning offerings. There are strategies around ongoing professional development for virtual learning for the instructors, which will be very important in order to fulfill the goal of expanding opportunities and using virtual settings. And then our sixth focus area is around support, and that is around removing barriers and supporting learners and families with understanding the opportunities that are available to them. Within each of these overarching focus areas are a number of strategies, promising practices, and state and local examples, as well as links to resources to support states and actualize CTE without borders. So you're encouraged to dig deep, look at the various strategies, promising practices, and the examples that are provided. And now I'm passing it on to my friend at Witchy, Christina.
Thanks so much, Dale. And the strategies and actions Dale just outlined are obviously a lot of work, right? But we think there are some really compelling reasons for really all the parties involved as to why you should pursue that work and put in that effort. And first and foremost, always beginning with the learner. We think this will really expand opportunities for learners and making sure that they can achieve their career goals really regardless of their geographic location. We also think there are a lot of opportunities here, as Haley mentioned, around virtual and hybrid options, those multiple modes of learning, and not just in didactic coursework and things like that, but also in work-based learning. We've seen some really exciting examples of those opportunities, becoming virtual, and that really expands opportunities for learners. And in that same vein, we think it also will ultimately enable conditions for successful transfers. And so students who are looking to ultimately move to another location, maybe they're in the military, there are lots of different reasons students will need to be mobile and making sure they're prepared to be successful wherever it is that they end up if they have access to a program that allows them to be successful in the local economy where they're heading to. And if we go to the next slide, please. It's not just the learners who benefit, though. It's also the industry partners and the institutional partners as well. For industries, they can sometimes achieve economies of scale if they're able to offer, programs across many different geographic locations, and they have access to a greater pool of workers. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the third bullet. There's also the opportunity to increase worker satisfaction. So if workers are able to access CTE opportunities virtually and again in hybrid modes, they have opportunities to really achieve, potentially career advancement and then also work-life balance. And then finally, it can overall support a more diverse and inclusive workforce, again, really expanding the geographic reach that industry and companies are able to access. And then finally, for institutions, again, it's all about the expanded access to partnerships. They can partner with more and different types of industry, and then also access a broader range of industry experts as well in their work. And then finally, and I know this is important to everybody, it can also support enrollment growth with, again, this broadening of opportunities. So we think for really all the parties involved, this can be sort of a triple win situation. And then I'm going to turn it over to Haley to talk about how we actually get there.
Thank you so much, Dale and Christina. Seeing all of those strategies and actions and all of the benefits for learners, industry, and institutions, as Christina mentioned, we believe that when all of these strategies, actions, and resources and promising practices that are highlighted in the playbook, that it's going to promote and expand opportunities and access. And it's our vision that leaders like yourselves will implement these actions in your own areas to expand access to high quality CTE and work-based learning to ensure that learners can engage in the programs of their choosing and transition into a high demand, high wage career. So CTE Without Borders in practice will provide learners with expanded learning opportunities, including the virtual and hybrid opportunities we mentioned earlier. But it also calls on districts, counties, and regions and states to work together to remove those barriers that learners can experience geographically. And when they face those in their programs and in their work-based learning and real-world work experience opportunities. So within the actualized CTE Without Borders, learners can engage in programs and opportunities outside of their home districts and regions and still accumulate the credits, knowledge, and skills that are needed to successfully transition into the workforce. And we know that this playbook is a lot. If you've had a chance to visit it, it's in 4 different parts because we wanted to break it down. But we hope that when you're viewing this playbook that you leverage it as a choose your own adventure, because this is an initiative that will likely take many years and will require continued evaluation, improvement, and innovation amongst agencies and partners involved. So we recommend that you choose your own adventure. And as you're reading through the playbook, you'll notice that there are a number of icons next to the strategies and actions to explain to you if it's going to expand secondary access, if it lends more towards expanding post-secondary access. And then there are also icons to share whether it's going to focus on in-state access or cross-state access to help you as you read through. The playbook has a lot of policy recommendations, and they're articulated as the best way to meet learners and industry's needs to actualize CTE without borders. I've shared many times that a lot of the issues that we face in education today were created by policy. So policy is a lever that we can use to change the way that systems are created and how our learners are experiencing education. So now that we've reviewed the purpose of CTE Without Borders and we've provided an overview of the resource, let's dig into some examples of actualized expanded access and how this work can be adopted by states and how the information in the playbook can support your states that are looking to expand access to high quality CTE and work-based learning to meet learners and industry's needs. So we have 2 panelists with us today to help answer some of our questions and provide insight on expanded access. So I'm going to take a moment to let our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll go ahead and start with Spencer.
Hi, everybody. My name is Spencer Sherman. I'm with the Link Learning Alliance, which is a nonprofit based in California that supports college career pathways for students. In my previous role, I was the Chief for Innovation at the Rhode Island Department of Ed, where I oversaw the Prepare Rhode Island initiative, which was the statewide college career readiness initiative there. So I'll talk a little bit about both.
Thanks, Spencer. And now let's hear from Michael Gonzalez.
Good afternoon, everybody, and a pleasure to be part of this panel. I'm Mike Gonzalez. I'm the Executive Director of the Rural School Innovation Zone in South Texas. It's the first of its kind in-district collaborative with 3 independent school districts in its inception, and we're now up to 5 independent school districts in a deep South Texas area, ranging 5 communities, 4 different counties, and about 875 square miles, each of them having a specialized academy within one of the 3 high schools. And the unique situation is that our kids get a chance to share all the resources and get a chance to attend any one of the 5 specialized academies that we have in the Rural School Innovation Zone, with still retaining their community identity and going back and representing their community. So looking forward to the discussion and questions going forward.
Perfect. Thank you, Mike. And thank you both for being here. And just so you all know, Mike and Spencer were 2 of the folks that I had some one-on-one interviews with to help support the development of the playbook. So we're very thankful for them for the information that they've shared and everything that they'll share with us today. So Mike, thank you so much for leading your introduction and sharing a little bit about the Rural Schools Innovation Zone to kind of share with everyone what it is. So let's take a moment, and Spencer, maybe you can share a little bit about PrepareRI and how that initiative is providing expanded access within the state.
Sure. So Prepare Rhode Island is an initiative that I was appointed for in my time at the Rhode Island Department of Ed. It was started by then Governor Gina Raimondo, who's now the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. And the idea was bringing together all the different state agencies in Rhode Island that are involved in college career readiness. So K-12, higher ed, workforce, the workforce boards, and also the Department of Commerce, all under the same roof to think strategically and coherently about how all these pieces fit together. It was a very successful initiative. So in the 5 years from starting to when I was heading out, we tripled the number of CTE programs in the state, went from half of the districts in the state having CTE programs to nearly 100%. All of those programs were aligned to new CTE standards, which we developed in partnership with industry through a new board. We increased the number of industry recognized credentials by 65%. We created individual learning plans and statewide platform for that expanded from 0% of schools to 100% of schools. Again, in those same 5 years, we had a statewide internship program, created a centralized enrollment platform. We did a lot of things very, very quickly. And I think part of part of how that was possible was by thinking a little bit bigger, sort of as Mike was talking about. So happy to talk a little more about that.
Awesome, thank you. Mike, do you mind sharing a little bit about how the zone came to fruition?
Yes, Haley, it's a quite interesting story. Fremont Independent School District was in a state of disarray, not having met state accountability standards for up to 9 consecutive years. 2 closure letters, the community going in the wrong direction, students leaving the school district. Spring of 2017, we hired a brand new superintendent, Steve Van Matry, who is now Toledo Midway ISD, and he completely revamped the entire program, trying to give our kids at Fremont ISD originally more options. So we had a gentleman's agreement between Freer ISD and Brooks County ISD that Fremont students would be shared in the welding program and the health science program. So fast forward for a year, and then we were signing a formal agreement with Texas Education Agency, formalizing the rural school innovation zone between 3 independent school districts, which was Fremont, Freer, and Brooks County ISD. So that's the short end of it, Ms. Haley, is that it was just not a chance for Fremont kids to get advantage of it. But now we're up to 5 different school districts involved, like I said, 4 different counties. We have about 417 students involved within the programming going there. Our college career military readiness score is at 98%, meaning 98% of our kids, our seniors that are graduating, score CCMR point, whether they're TSI ready and or have 9 or more college credit hours and are on path for an associate's degree. The data shows that we're just stronger together, because unfortunately, like Spencer alluded to a couple of different times, his expansion of CTE pathways within his area gave us those opportunities in our area to make sure that our kids were ready to go. And unfortunately, in rural America, period, not just rural South Texas, if our kids leave our community dies. So we want to be able to give our kids those opportunities to expand and be better citizens, but also to come back and raise a family within our community, right? So give them a chance to understand that they can commute and get different jobs within our area, but maintain the integrity of the community identity and going forward and making it stronger.
Thank you, Mike. I always love when I hear you talk, because your story is so powerful, and I love hearing how you talk about the work. Okay, love hearing those overviews and intros and how those things came together. I would love to go through some of the focus areas that we specifically mentioned in the policy playbook. So starting at the top of the policy playbook, we talk about aligning partners' values and vision. So Spencer, I would love for you to start and to share a little bit about like how all of that was able to come together. I know you talked a little bit about how the work started, but let's talk specifically about some of the systems and structures that were put in place to support this work and still continues to support this work to this day.
Yeah, the more I'm useless for it and it continues without me, the happier I am. So I think that part of that is getting that buy-in at all levels of the organization. So I think we started off with some strong executive leadership from our governor. We have a new governor in place. The work is continuing. We also had a team that created. So the governor set like some 5-year goals for what we wanted to do. We had each of the commissioners from K-12, higher ed, and workforce meet and agree on what's like a 1-year goal, what's a 6-month goal, to sort of make it a little more concrete and actionable. And then we had a team of sort of the mid-level leadership across the different agencies meet on a weekly basis to talk through what this week was tough. And that helped us sort of from a government side make sure stuff was working. We also had structures to make sure that this exists like in the grassroots, because ultimately like bureaucrats come and go, people like me come and go, but like we want to make sure that there's like a lot of folks on the ground who are bought in. So we had what we called summits, which were like just giant conferences that brought in folks from across the region to understand like what already exists that you could take advantage of. What problems do you have? So it's a 2-way street. We learn from them and they learn from us. And then there's that buy-in at the grassroots level. We also did a thing where what we called the PrepareRI Ambassador Program, where we had some leaders from the field come and work with us during the school year, part-time, like 5 hours a week. And they were helping us understand what are the real problems directly right now in the field. And they're also spokespeople from like, here's all these things you might not know about because there's some like hidden PDF on some government website. They can explain it in a way that really makes sense to them and their community. So I think the sort of all different levels is really the way to make sure that you have buy-in and it continues.
Thanks, Spencer. And yes, I greatly appreciated you and Steve Osborne from Rhode Island walking me through all the appendices of the random government documents, and much needed. Mike, is there anything else that you can share about like the leadership and being able to convene all of the folks together to make the zone come to fruition?
Spencer said it very eloquently, and he had all the levers, right? So I felt we took it to a different level this year, encompassing state legislatures and those things. So we had a law bill passed, House Bill 2209, called the RPEP bill, which is incentivizing rural collaboration in the state of Texas. So extra CTE funding that's going to be able to be used to sustain the programming and the collaboration that we have available to us right now, right? So I think that's very important, because when you have that external partner overseeing and bringing those groups together, it's very, very powerful. And Spencer alluded to that a number of times with his summits and those things. So we just got into a stakeholder convening last Saturday, where we brought everybody to the table, our superintendents, our local boards, our teachers, and got a full 360 view of the zone, right? And so we're rebranding, relaunching the Zone 2.0 right now, and trying to do a rebranding and a different logo, because we're in our 5th year of existence. We started, flying the plane before we even had wings, pretty much. We're kind of barefooting it all the way through, kind of like Fred Flintstone. But now we got some wings, we got a little bit underneath us. We feel pretty proud of what we're doing. And now it's time to really get very strategic about the things that we're doing. We're looking for a multi-state innovation zone. If anybody out there wants to, get together and let's talk and collaborate with some federal monies across the state, and start really accentuating our workforce needs, across not only regionally, but across the states and nationally, right? Because we're importing right now in our health science situation, about 150 LVNs are in, every 6 months in our area. So we're trying to get a direct pipeline to our regional health science providers, that our health science academy can produce anywhere between 10 to 25 prospective LVNs, RNs before it's all said and done. So kind of have that grow your own mentality within all of our academies. So and the state legislature bought into this. I mean, it's been a phenomenal ride to get the bill passed. I'm a government teacher, and I didn't know all the complexities and all the backdoor agreements that were gonna happen. But it's a great situation. I'm looking forward to the extra funding in 24-25 school year, and really taking it completely to a different level. And hopefully, I personally think the models can be replicated across the United States. I love Rhode Island area. I love the East Coast. In about May, June, and July, Spencer, don't invite me, during your winter months, but anytime, during the early summer, I'm game to go up there and share some ideas. So just throwing that out there. But yes, Haley, that's like I said, Spencer did it really well, and I just think we brought in the state legislatures, and those guys a little bit more to incentivize what we're trying to do in Texas.
Absolutely. And once everyone is brought together, then it's like time to get into the weeds, right? So thinking about opportunities for funding, and then, capturing credits. So I would love to hear and start with you, Mike. So when thinking about the Rural Schools Innovation Zone, how are you able to work across the school districts that are comprising the zone and navigate local control, which I know all the state directors on this call love to hear, to ensure that learners can access programs outside of their home districts, but their credits are still captured, and all of that learning is captured?
That's a very complex question, Ms. Haley, for a very simple guy. So I'm gonna try to give you the Crayola version of it. Okay, so basically we started off. It was a financial incentive at the very beginning, right? So it was an in-district charter component through House Bill 1882 that incentivized an external managing partner, right, which was the Rural School Innovation Zone with the 501c3. So basically, I was the superintendent of schools for the 3 districts, the 3 high schools that were in charge, which was Valparaiso High School, Freer, and Fremont. I learned this word in DC, local champion, right? So I firmly believe you need a local champion, somebody that understands the complexion and the makeup of your area. Born and raised in South Texas, and being a rural ed student myself, I understood completely the struggles, and being an administrator for 21 years, I understood what the problems and issues were at the principal level, teacher level, and superintendent level. So when I was fortunate enough to be hired, it was easy for me to make that transition, right? I knew all 3 superintendents on a professional level, but I also had worked with them in different capacities as an athletic director and coach in my prior school. So we had this relationship. So as opposed to me running rogue and just running the school districts. We collaborated, all four of us. So nothing was ever pushed to my 501c3 board as a separate idea, right? It was a huge collaboration between all four school districts. And then now you start taking care of the little things, right? The credits and those things, and making sure that our counselors and our principals are all on board. So we hired some technical assistants from the outside to make sure all of our classes were coded correctly, to the point of we maximized CTE funding in one of my districts 294%, just because it was an extra set of eyes looking at the PEAMS coding to make sure that across the district, everybody taking principles of manufacturing was coded in the exact same class with the exact same funding, right? So it just took some of those little opportunities to make sure that we were doing things correctly, right? And then get down to the local boards. Different flavor, Haley, you know that based on our individual conversation. It's a tough sell in a lot of situations, but basically knowing and understanding that we have a hashtag, my students, your students, our students, right? And knowing that no matter where your kids are at, your kids are always taken care of. They're a priority for me and everybody else, right? So our kids travel one way, an hour and 15 minutes to get to a health science academy or to one of my welding academies. So it's a good situation knowing that the local boards know that we're taking care of our students, no matter what school color they wear. So those things are all important, and making sure that we're all aligned on the same page going forward. But technical assistance has been huge. Understand the complexion of the area. It's huge. I couldn't do what Spencer did or does in Rhode Island, because I don't know Rhode Island, right? The same way I don't think he could walk into South Texas and do his thing in South Texas. It's a different nuance. So I think hiring a local champion to oversee and to be that intermediary, that convener of minds is a huge thing. I didn't think I could pull it off, but this Saturday really made me feel very confident, because we had everybody there. We had the people, boots on the ground, the teachers that I deal with on a daily basis, superintendents. I don't deal with the boards on a daily basis, but it was good for the affirmation, knowing that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing for our kids, right? No matter what school color they wore. So I don't know if that completely answered your question, but hopefully it did. It's just, off the top.
Well, thank you, Mike. And I'm also glad that you felt affirmed in your leadership, because every time I talk to you, it's an amazing experience, and you were very impressive and very knowledgeable. So thank you for being here with us today again. Spencer, is there anything that you'd like to share from the Prepare Rhode Island perspective?
On expanded access?
Well, specifically about capturing credits and making sure that learners' experiences are captured, credit, portable.
Yeah, so I think one thing that we did, and first thing was at a sort of like a state perspective is, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. And so the more that we could, all this good stuff was happening, but we didn't know it. And so once you don't know it, then it's really hard to catch the inequities that happen in every education system if you don't see those gaps. Like once you see those numbers, is what motivates folks. It's easy when you're a teacher on the ground and you sort of see it in your classroom. But when you're at sort of the systems level, if you don't see the numbers, then you're not able to sort of look around and see where the inequities are. So one thing we did is we created a new measure in our state accountability system that measures not just graduation rate, but also dual enrollment and earning industry recognized credentials. So that was a new measure we didn't have before. We created that. We created a new dashboard for our CTE programs to measure how many kids were actually completing, break it apart by race, demographics, and other factors to see, all right, we have built all these new CTE programs, which is great. How many people are actually completing them? And what's the demographic makeup of who's actually completing them? Because then once you start diving into that, we saw some really interesting patterns. For example, like we saw overall CTE numbers were up, but we mostly saw sort of perpetuation of stereotypes in who was in each program. Like our nursing programs were overwhelmingly female. Things like that. We're like, we need to do a little bit better job on our end, and the data gave us a chance to do that. Another thing we did, besides creating the data system, is we launched this statewide unified enrollment portal called EnrollRI. And what that is, it's a really complicated, wonky thing for a really simple idea, which is just go to one place to sign up for stuff. So we created one website that piped in on the back end all this data information for all these different websites. But if you're a kid, you want to sign up for something, you go to that website. If you want to sign up for a school, you go there. You want to sign up for a college class, you go there. You want to sign up for a class at a local nonprofit, you go there. And so first, from a student perspective, that was way simpler and way easier. And so the more that we can do the hard work on the back end to make it easier for kids, the better. The other thing is it gave us useful data too, because then we could track like who's not accessing this. And we built it in a way that was built on like a Salesforce platform. So we had like a dashboard. So every week we could go, the commissioner asked me, and we could just walk down, open up this little browser together and say, which school districts aren't having access? Okay, let's call up those school districts and make sure they have access.
Thank you, Spencer. Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I love especially like the transparency and the ease of access, especially for learners, which makes me wonder about like the systems and levers of support for learners when we do expand access. So, Mike, I would love to hear from you. What are some things that are taking place in the zone to ensure that learners are informed of the opportunities to navigate these different academies and also their support to ensure success in their programs?
Sorry about that. Mute. It would take it off mute would help. I get started on the informational side, Miss Haley. So my junior high principals now have gotten more involved. It's something that I've been strategic about because, you know, we want to get it down. I mean, Spencer probably goes all the way down to 5th grade to get his people, his students, you know, oriented to what's going on and what's available in Rhode Island. So we've taken it down to the 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade as far as some of our modules and curriculum to make sure that our kids are aware of the possibilities and opportunities they have within the zone, right? What they have within the 5 specialized academies. So we've been very strategic in that situation. And the 8th grade side, when they're getting ready in the fall, we take what we call the carnival tour, right? So every 8th grader mounts up in a bus and we go visit every specialized academy, our career-oriented academy that we have within the zone. And they're led around by student ambassadors and the teachers, right? To make sure that they understand, they can see the equipment. I'm sure it's like this everywhere, but in South Texas, you know, you can talk about it, but if you can't see it or touch it, it doesn't exist, right? So when our kids saw the equipment that we were purchasing through our grant funds and our collaborative funds, it was amazing that they were choosing to steer away from their home campuses and take an adventure and get into something brand new, right? Because in one of my districts, they have a welding program it's a non-P-Tech situation, and then we have a P-Tech associate degree track as far as welding is concerned, right? And these kids are choosing to wake up at 5:45 in the morning, get on the bus at 6:30 to be in class by 8 o'clock, right? When they could just sit there and learn how to weld at home, right? So I feel very confident that those kind of tours are really making a huge impact on our kids. So we're going to add a layer this year, right? Because I do really pay attention to people who have critiques or are very critical of some of the things that we do. So we're going to have a family day. So we're going to invite one parent along with a student and have them tour the academies during the school day so they can see the kids working and our teachers teaching and everything else and let them understand what it's like to get up at 5:30 in the morning to get on the bus by 6:30 to get on the road to go take a class that they're really high on, right? That's a huge thing. So that's the pre-information, right? That we want to be sure we have those every spring during pre-registration, and Spencer and I are going to get together after this because I like the one spot location for registration. We do a family information session, right, in every district that we go to. So we don't want to bring everybody into one location because we feel like it's prohibitive sometimes. Some of our families, like every family in around the nation, don't have the means to get in a vehicle and get someplace at 6:30 in the evening. So we take the road, the show on the road. So we visit every community and we have a very enhanced perspective of what we offer at our academies, right? It gets very intense and kind of long, right? We need to do a better job of trimming that up. And then we get into pre-registration process, right? And so if kids are iffy, we try to take them for one last tour and let them make a good determination in a good situation, right? Even though they can always change, but now with Texas changing some of the standards, you know, we want to be sure that our kids are very mindful of their strategy going forward. Then our support system is phenomenal. You know, we have a paraprofessional that's assigned to each one of our buses or each one of our academies that, again, take attendance is a big deal for us, right? Because if a kid's there, a kid's going to learn. A kid learns, a kid's going to pass. Kid pass, kid, you know, it's a snowball effect. So very intentful about and mindful about it, who we hire to be on the bus. And that paraprofessional reports back. We have a zone director on campus, right? That's in charge of all the kids that are traveling and all any other specialized academies we have on that campus. And that's a direct report to me and the principal. So very strategic plan about grade and attendance, you know, making the parent contact. and those situations, and then again, you bring in the dual credit fold and all those things there, right? The I guess all the incentives that our IHEs have that are available to our dual credit kids also are layered on top of that. So I'm a big firm believer in dual credit and CTE opportunities. Unfortunately, our kids in South Texas, they go off to University of Texas, Texas A&M College Station, Yale, Harvard, or whatever the situation is, and they're back. Right, I'm on the athletic side a lot, and I have probably a lot more friends on the athletic side than I do on the education side. But my friends, my coaches' friends that are in the college level, they call it the tortilla factor. And what that means is my kids come back home during Thanksgiving break and their Christmas break, eat mom and grandma's tortillas, and they don't go back to school, right? So they don't recruit South Texas very well because of that factor. So we're trying to get our kids aware that you're going to have some hard times in college and those things, but if we prepare them in the high school situation, they're better prepared to handle that when they're by themselves as adults, right? And then once they get that Harvard degree or Yale degree or UT degree, they can come back home and be a significant role model for the rest of our community in our area. So we try to pattern that, Haley. We're not, we just graduated our first cohort, so we're really interested to see where that's gonna take us the next 2 years. And we hope that those things are mindful and have been embedded in planning our kids going forward.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And also just a quick question, because you mentioned you had a stakeholder day, right, this past Saturday. Were
Yes, ma'am.
learners also a part of that conversation to help, structure this, elevation of the zone?
Did you say learners, like as in students?
Yes.
Well, here's the situation, Haley. They were when our convening was gonna be a day and a half, but with outbreak of COVID in our situation and those things, we didn't want to get together as much as we thought we should. So unfortunately, the thing that had to be chopped was our kids, because I wanted our adults to be very mindful and very open and frank about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the zone. And sometimes when you have kids in the room, our adults are a little bit mindful of those things, right? So I wanted to have the hard talk as quick as possible for us to relaunch the zone. So the kids weren't invited as part of what we did on Saturday, but they were in my original plan because I wanted the adults to see the culmination of all of our hard work, right? To see our kids present and for them to tell their story. My kids have fortunately gone on the road to tell their story in DC on Capitol Hill and in Houston at CCRSM Summit. So our kids are very active and involved in presenting their story. And unfortunately, that had to be the thing that had to get cut because of time. So they were originally there, had to cut it just because of the situation on a Saturday, but they're definitely on the hot topic of priority number 1 for the second annual convening that will be held June 2024.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. And Spencer, one more follow-up from you, and then we'll go to questions from the audience, but would love to hear from a state level perspective in terms of informing, the entire state about the opportunities coming with the Prepare Rhode Island initiative. How did Rhode Island handle that?
Yeah, I think one thing just to be from a state level perspective is like humble about how little people like care, at least from the government side. Like honestly, like how little people are like really following like the Department of Education like Twitter account or X account, whatever it's called now. Like that's not the best way to reach kids. So the best way to reach kids is through the people that interact with them every day, which is parents, teachers, family members, other trusted adults. So I think the more that we can sort of be humble about our own abilities and go like directly to the folks who can make the most difference, I think that's an important strategy. I think I'm also, I'm speaking a lot about Rhode Island, but like my organization right now is like based in California. And so I'm getting a sense, and Mike, if you want to visit me in California too, the weather's better there. So that would work too. So I think like the scale is so much different. So I think there's lessons learned of like, what can you do at the scale of Rhode Island? What can you do at the scale of California? And like, what should be regional and what should be local? And so I think like one big takeaway is thinking like really carefully about what should be centralized and what should be decentralized. So I think centrally, there's some like really good legislation. I'm bad at golf. I got to warn you, Mike. I played like once. The things that are best done centrally, I think, are everything that involves sort of like some of the bureaucracy, some of the paperwork. So like, for example, our internship program, there's complicated issues about how you manage like background checks right now in California that we're working on centrally in California, because that is a legislative issue that needs to be handled collectively, can't be handled individually. There's some issues around like who's the employer of record in Rhode Island when we create a statewide internship program. That needs to be done collectively because it's too hard to do individually. but all the detailed stuff about like what kids should be in which program or like what's the right opportunity for each kid, that needs to be done locally. So I think there's like we basically had like a 2-column chart. What should be centralized? What should be decentralized? That helps us understand like what are the things where like you need to have that local context. As like Mike was pointing out, there's so many things that I don't understand about the local context, and I never will understand. And I think part of my job is understand how little I understand it, and delegate that to someone who is closer to the field, closer to the grassroots to make those decisions, because they'll make better decisions than I can. But what I can do is do things centrally to facilitate those decisions, right? I can train the people who are going to be closer to the kids. I can provide a lot of free resources that are easily accessible for those folks. I can provide, like in Rhode Island, we had interdistrict transfer for CTE. If you don't like your home school district, you can transfer to a different CTE program in across another school district. And that's your choice. I can build the system, but you need to be the one making that decision. And we're doing things like that in California too, where there's a new law passed there last year called the Golden State Pathways Program, which Emily from now Advanced CTE was very involved in formerly with us. That law provides a lot of funding to help people cross those lines centrally. Like, how do you connect career education with post-secondary training, with work-based learning? Those systems are all designed separately. But when you have some centralized funding that's being given to regional hubs, that makes it a little easier for people to connect the dots and then allow the local stakeholders to make their own decisions.
Great. Thank you so much for fielding those questions. I'm going to elevate some of the questions that were shared from our audience. So this first one is anonymous, and they're asking, what were the key points that stuck with legislators or that the commissioners and higher ups were easy to agree upon as a North Star? Whoever would like to start, either Spencer or Michael.
Well, on our end, again, because it's kind of new to me and everybody else. So the passing of the House Bill 2209 that incentivized the collaboration and the things that we're doing was semi-easy because we had so much support already from Commissioner Morath, right, the Commissioner of Education, because he was the one who started initially the talk about collaboration and getting people, rural schools, to talk and make sure we were taking advantage of opportunities, right? He understood that there was no way all 5 of my districts could do a STEM program. But if one school did it and we shared that resource and divided that teacher by 5, because we're all paying into the salary, we could all afford and incentivize what was going on. I know there was a question about CTE teachers and those things. When we're talking about that kind of support, you're able to be very competitive in the open job market when you're hiring a master electrician or a master plumber, right? Because they're probably making a lot more in the field than they would and in a school district. But once you start talking about the calendars and them working from 8 to 4, in that situation, and being off on Thanksgiving, and they can go make some side money and still paying them a little bit more than you would a regular teacher, it incentivizes them to be within the school system. So there are a lot of those little things that the legislators and those guys really admired about what we're doing, because we're the scale of the economy, and all those wonderful things and sharing resources. It was providing opportunities for kids who otherwise would not have those opportunities. That was only happening in suburban and urban Texas. So not that Texas is urban and suburban, but you get my point.
Thanks.
I think to build on Mike's answer, I think like for us, it was like this work, I think it really sells itself. Is everyone wants kids who have a better education and better high paying jobs. I think that's like kind of a no-brainer. So I think we start from that. All the high level commissioners and legislative people all agreed with that. It was just a matter of like defining a little more narrowly, like how do we define what a good job is? How do we define like a high growth job? And once you sort of really define like high wage, high growth jobs, higher graduation rate, kids graduating ready for the next thing, measured by a number of like college credits they've gotten or work-based learning experiences or credentials in high growth jobs, that kind of stuff came up pretty quickly as like North Star metrics that I don't think took honestly a ton of time. The devil's really the details there, but I think that high level stuff comes pretty quick. There's a lot of people you can copy it from, not just the 2 of us. There's a lot of organizations and states doing this.
Great. Okay, let's go to our next question. This is from Margaret Jenkins. She says, what is the role of professional organizations in the innovation zone sustainability? What professional organizations should be involved?
Great question, Ms. Jenkins. Let me know what you come up with as an answer, because we're trying to get we're so far behind the eight ball, Haley, when it comes to philanthropic money, right? Because being in education for as many years as I have been, you know, as a principal, administrator, athletic director, I was just given my pie. It was up to me to divide my pie. I was never told to build and create my pie as big as I wanted, right? So we're very much behind in the 501c3 philanthropic situation. That's why I think we've been very heavy on going after major grants to make sure that our school districts facilitate and are able to sustain the programming that we're doing. I think we have a very unique, what we call the tuition funding model, you know, where we take all of our kids in our specialized academies and divide out all of our expenses, right? Our supplies and materials, our salaries, you know, any technical assistance provided, and those things. So it's a lot easier to afford when you break it up. And you were dividing by 3 originally, now we're dividing by 5. So it makes a technical assistance provider that's a resident expert in PEEMS, it makes it a lot easier to swallow the pill when you're only paying $8,000 as opposed to $40,000. You know, so all those things going through uh, allow us all those different things. So I don't know what organizations really need to be involved as far as special ones for a funding situation. We do like to get involved with, you know, the local ones as far as our organization, right? You know, the TAFE and those kind of situations for our kids. You know, our FFA, our ag department, those things for our kids. But as far as an organization and perspectives, Ms. Jenkins, I'm open, receptive to any ideas that you have on our end, because Mike Gonzalez is not very good when it comes to asking for money. So let me know how you want me to drive that conversation.
Awesome. This is a question from Kyle. He asks, how are work-based learning sites established? I would appreciate maybe a little bit more information, but if there's anything that either of you could share about work-based learning and choosing those opportunities for learners, maybe that'll be helpful.
You want to go, Spencer?
Yeah, I'm trying to spread, like, I guess in both contexts, we're trying to have work-based learning happen in every single school. So in Rhode Island, we had like updated requirements and set like sort of like standards and guidance for like what it could look like, what work-based learning could look like what's high quality, what's not high quality. You know, there's a difference between just like, you know, having someone show up to your school and talk about their job versus you actually go to them and do the job with them. So we provide more guidance on what quality looks like, and then to get sort of certified by the state of Rhode Island, you had to actually do it and have a partnership in every school. With my like linked learning hat on, we have like a framework that's research backed that sort of shows like what leads to good results for kids. And again, it's like every single school district having those relationships and having work-based learning experiences for kids. So I think it should be at every single school site. There's a lot you can do, like I said before, to make those relationships easier, because it's hard for individual principals with everything else they're doing to make those phone calls. So the more you can have the relationship building happen at a higher level and do it for the whole region or for the whole district, that's a whole lot easier. But every school should be offering opportunities.
Totally agree with both Spencer's points. Our school counselors and our principals are overwhelmed. You know, it's very difficult if you haven't walked in those shoes, right? Because unfortunately, I've walked in both of them, so I understand the complexity they go through in the day-to-day grind. And even in my position, I was late to CTE Without Borders, you know, because I had a school issue. So, you know, I understand what they go through. So to get somebody like an external partner involved, that intermediary, that convener to do some of that work, is totally right on point what Spencer said. And that's my job and my responsibility. So every one of my 5 specialized academies, my health science academy, my STEM, my Grow Your Own Teacher Academy, my traditional CTE Pathway Academy of Welding, Electrical, Construction, and Heavy Equipment Operations, I'll have a business industry partner that we partner with to give our kids paid internship opportunities once they become certified in whatever field they're in, right? Whether it's their initial safety certification or their level 1, level 2 in welding, or their EKG phlebotomy certification, whatever it is that they're about, we can try to get our kids in the work environment as quickly as possible. I firmly believe networking is the right way to go. So if I get an EKG student in a hospital situation and I see the right nurse there that could possibly be a CFO, CEO going on, you know, I want to be sure that my kid from my health science academy has that first impression situation ready to go, right? And that way, when she gets her LVN or RN, it's going to be that much better for them to get a job and easier for them to get a job.
Okay, thank you both so much for speaking to that question. To our audience, I am so sorry we are running out of time, so I am going to have to pause those questions. I will just ask Spencer and Mike to maybe in 1 minute each, just share a piece of advice for the folks on this call that are interested in working towards actualizing expanded access. We can start with Spencer.
Me first. Everybody's excited to try to summarize in a sentence. So I think maybe like it's sort of like obvious advice, but I would sort of make sure you're working backwards from what the actual needs are. I had a lot of ideas what the problems were in my head, and most of those ideas were wrong. So I think there's a tendency to start from the top down. I'd really start from the bottom up. So if you have these problems, talk to the folks who are having the problems. And some of the barriers that seem like barriers from your seat probably aren't actually the barriers that the kids you're directly trying to serve are facing. So I would start with humility and learning, by talking directly to the folks, then use that to define your problem. And then once you define the problem, then you can start figuring out what level of organization should handle this. But I think my short advice would be start backwards, start with defining the problem better with conversations from those most directly affected.
And on my end, Haley, it would be partnerships, and relationships, right? Because in rural America, you can't stand alone and do it well. We stand resolved that our zip code should not dictate the amount of post-secondary success for our kids, right? Because we feel we should have equitable access to everything. And we feel pulling our resources together, our 5 school districts, it gives our kids in South Texas an opportunity to be marketable with bigger, larger urban, suburban school districts, not only in the state, but around the country. So I think partnership building and getting the innovative leaders outside of their box is going to be huge.
Well, thank you so much for coming today, for sharing all of your experiences and your knowledge and your expertise. As you can see, the audience absolutely loved y'all, and they continue to have questions for you. So we have shared your contact information in the chat. So audience, you can see Mike's and Spencer's contact information in there. And if not, Tanya can elevate and pop it back in the chat. So if you have any additional questions, I'm sure they'd be more than happy to connect via email and answer any additional questions. But because we only have less than 1 minute left, I want to go ahead and move us along to looking ahead and next steps. So some immediate actions that you can take now that we've talked about the overview of the initiative, the policy playbook, and heard from some really promising and strong examples. So some recommendations to move forward is to review the CTE Without Borders policy playbook. When you're reviewing the policy playbook, again, it's a choose your own adventure. So there are opportunities to identify some low-hanging fruit, things that you can achieve right now. And then there are also opportunities to action plan for more labor and resource intensive actions. And of course, taking the advice of our panelists that they just shared before they closed out their question and answer section. And of course, please reach out to us if there's any information that you are wondering about. If you have additional questions on, we are more than happy to support you and to work with you. If there's anything that we can do, please do not hesitate to reach out. But other than that, because we are right at time, I just want to thank Christina and Dale. Thank you so much for all of your work on the playbook and for joining this webinar. And for Spencer and Mike, thank you so much for fielding all of the questions and sharing information. And for all of you that joined us today, thank you so much. We appreciate your time and your engagement. And I hope you'll have a great rest of your Tuesday.